Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End weekend preview. The Championship is back after a 2-week international break, with Reading hosting fellow strugglers Millwall this Saturday. My name is Olly Allen, your host for today's show, and I'm pleased to say that I'm joined once again by the Wokingham paper's Tom Crocker. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, good, thanks, Ollie. England won the other day and I'm off on holiday in a few hours, so it's been a good week.
I mean, yeah, it was quite nice to see England put out a performance like that when Reading aren't doing much on the pitch at the moment. So,
yeah, it was a nice, bit of a more of a positive watch than it has been for us in recent weeks, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a quiet international break in general for Reading. Not an awful lot of news. I think you could tell that by the amount of, or the lack of content actually we had on the Tilehurst, and there wasn't much to talk about at all. I mean, there was one small bit of speculation that we'll address just quickly to start with, and that did crop up in the Sun. So take that with a pinch of salt. But they claim that the pressure was growing on Paul Clement, with Royals legend and current Bolton manager Phil Parkinson, a potential candidate to replace him. And now, to me, Tom, I think it's not particularly hard to presume that Clement is under pressure, sort of given the position that Reading currently find themselves in. I mean, I think I'd be a little bit worried if he was under pressure, given where Reading are on the table. And obviously, Parkinson's names always sort of seems to crop up when a managerial position at Reading is sort of discussed. And I mean, Yapstam was sacked during an international break back in March. I mean, so it certainly wouldn't have been out of the question to see Clement go in the break just gone. But I mean, certainly it seems as though his job is still safe at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this next block of games is going to be pretty important. I think it's 5 more games and another international break, so I think they're more likely to look at it after that. I think it would have been a bit quick to pull the trigger just yet. Obviously, he's kept them up last year, which was the first job, and then he's had quite a bit of a rebuild over the summer, brought a lot of players in, and obviously results, it's not gone well so far. And like you say, he himself will know he's under pressure to turn that around pretty quickly. But obviously, as I say, Parkinson link is a pretty easy one to make, and that's, if Clement was to go, I'm sure his name would be in the frame again. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a case of. I think he's got a little bit of time on his side, and I think these next 5 games are going to be important. Then, if after the next international break, if they're in the relegation zone, I think he's going to have a bit of work to do to keep hold of his job. But for now, I think he's okay.
Certainly, this Millwall game this weekend is sort of one that he has to be winning to prove that he's still the right man for the job. I mean, we're currently only out of the relegation zone on goal difference. I mean, I saw he was talking again a couple of weeks ago about saying how we were, if we'd won the West Brom game, we would have been close to mid-table, which again I think is ludicrous talk at the moment, considering we are only out of the relegation zone on goal difference. We have won just once at home in the league all season, of course, this weekend's game being at home. But Millwall are only a point and a place above us, and themselves are yet to win away from home this season. I mean, it's those sort of stats, Tom, that always seem to sort of set up a Reading defeat. But in all seriousness, that really can't be an option this weekend, can it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, there's Reading are really poor at home, Millwall really poor away. So it's one of those games. I think there's a couple more, Ipswich and Birmingham coming up as well, where you look at it and. I think if Reading can win this first one, then I think they could pick up quite a few points. I think they could go on a bit of a run. But yeah, it's a game where I think Clement and the whole team will look at it as well. If they lose that one, it's going to probably be in the bottom 3, and then it's going to be pressure building just as it has been all season. And like you say, it's sort of home game that if you win it, they'll probably push up a couple of places and things will look a little bit brighter again. And it's a sort of one they really have to be winning if they're serious about. Like I say, that's the only thing I really about Clement that has been a bit frustrating this season is those sort of comments. I mean, generally, I'm quite happy with how honest he's been after games. He's not hiding away from anything, but I think that's just there's no point in saying they're close to mid-table. The fact is they're not at the moment, so it's just like they're trying to keep their heads down, try and pick up these points, and then they can be a mid-table and start talking about it. But for now, they've got to get these wins, and Saturday, like I say, it's a really big one.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen those home games against the teams sort of, down the bottom of the table with Reading sort of go one of 2 ways. Obviously, we saw the game against Hull. Reading won quite convincingly 3-0, and then only a couple of weeks later we lost 1-0 to QPR, which is quite a poor performance. I think certainly this Millwall game could go either of those 2 ways, or perhaps somewhere in the middle. Reading are the favourites for this one with the bookmakers, but not by much at all. I think we are 13-8 to get the win. Millwall are 17-10, and the draw is the most likely according to the bookmakers at 11-5. And those odds are according to Odds Checker, #GambleAware. So there's not an awful lot to separate the sides in those odds. Not a lot to separate the sides in the table. As mentioned, there's only a point and a place between the 2 teams. So it's certainly setting up, Tom, to potentially be a sort of a scrappy encounter where one goal might win it.
Yeah, quite possibly. I would say there's been plenty of these sort of games in the last last few weeks, and even going back to last season as well. So you hope from a Reading point of view it could be similar to the sort of the whole game, and they just push on and get a comfortable win there. But I think Millwall, the team looks pretty similar to the one that came last year, and I think they probably did overachieve possibly last year when you look at their team. Obviously, they've still got Jake Cooper playing a big role in the team, and they're a pretty solid side. I'm sure you heard more from the Millwall fan in a minute, but I heard that Neil Harris under a little bit of pressure, I think, from some of the fans, which seems a bit crazy, really. But like I say, it'd probably be quite a scrappy game. Two fairly well matched sides. Millwall will be well up for it. They'll look at it as a game that they can get their first away win and push away from danger themselves. So it feels very similar to a lot of these games we've had this season, and you've got to hope Reading can somehow get out the right side of it and start grinding out some wins, especially at home.
You've set me up very nicely for the link into the next part of the show, because it is indeed time to find out a little bit more about Millwall in the view from the town end, where we get the thoughts of an opposition fan ahead of the game.
The view from the town end. What the opposition think.
View from the town end time then, and with Reading hosting Millwall on Saturday, I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by Lions fan Lucas Ball. How's it going, Lucas?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself, mate?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thanks. Millwall currently sit 20th in the Championship table, a point and a place above Reading, having moved out of the relegation zone by beating Aston Villa 2-1 before the international break. And obviously, this is quite in contrast to last season. You sort of surprised everyone, really, by having a really strong campaign after coming up from League One. I mean, it looked at a point as though you might even qualify for the playoffs, but you still finished 8th in the table, which is quite a feat in itself. I think. Can you pinpoint just why this sudden sort of drop off has occurred?
Well, under Neil Harris, we've always been a second half of the season side the last few years, anyway.
Yeah.
But I think probably the main thing was this season we had in August there was a bit of transfer speculation surrounding a few other players, and caused a bit of unrest within the squad. Ended up with George Saville left for around $8 million on deadline day. Brought in Ryan Leonard, so there was a couple of signings that were quite rushed towards the end of the window, and maybe took a little bit longer to get into the team and really get used to the way we play, as opposed to some of the other players that we scouted earlier in the summer and got through the door a bit quicker, which is how Neil Harris likes to do his business. We had Murray Wallace, I think, in by July. Ben Amos came in when we was on our training camp in Portugal, so you had a couple of those guys in a bit earlier, had that bit of time to adapt. But having said that, Ryan Leonard has settled in very well. Tom Bradshaw maybe hasn't had the game time that he'd have wanted yet, but we're getting there.
What was the expectation sort of like coming into this season? Obviously, as mentioned, you did have an excellent 2017 to 18, but it was somewhat of a surprise. I mean, was there a feeling sort of that Millwall could replicate it again this time around, or even push sort of high, or sort of were you expecting sort of that drop off a little?
I think to an extent we all expected a bit of a drop off. Obviously, it would have been nice to come into the playoffs again, but we did start poorly last year. The only difference this year with the start of the season was this year we're coming away from a few games we've come away from, like, how have we not lost that by more, whereas last year it was, how have we not got something out of that game? So we're just, it's a case of building again, and Neil, he's done a very good job in the last 3 years. Whenever he's lost players, always brought good quality back in. So hopefully more of the same. And like I say, Ryan Leonard certainly looks a very astute signing so far.
I wanted to talk about Neil Harris, actually. Obviously, he's been in charge since March 2015, making him the longest serving manager in the Championship by quite some distance. You've mentioned that sort of Millwall will sort of historically sort of pick up in the latter stages of the season. But do you think he has it in him to get Millwall out of this rut? I mean, I suppose being a club legend sort of from his playing days will always endear him to fans more, and perhaps give him a bit more time, if you like. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think there's any risk of Neil being sacked anytime soon. I think we could get relegated this year, and I still don't think he'd get the sack.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, I mean, if you look at before he came in, towards the end under Steve Lomas and then Ian Holloway after him, especially with Holloway, it was so toxic. Everyone just was so on his back, and I was surprised that if he'd have stayed much longer, I don't know that he'd have made it out the stadium alive. But I think Neil, he's done a very good job the last 3 years. We've progressed every year, and he said the other week himself, 3.5 years of good work isn't undone by 5-6 bad weeks, which we had at the start of this season. And there's plenty of time to turn it around, and we have looked a lot better in the last 2 games against Nottingham Forest and then Villa, which was, I think, the first win in 9.
You mentioned that Villa win there. Do you think then the international break perhaps came at sort of the wrong time as you got that win? Do you think it might have been important sort of to get going as soon as possible to try and build on that, or do you think that Millwall will try and carry that momentum into Saturday's game?
I think in some ways it would have been nice to be back playing straight away because the players are coming off that first win in a long time, and they want to keep that feeling going. But then also I think for a good 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks we'd been playing Saturday, Tuesday or Saturday, Wednesday. So it was quite good that the players have got a bit of a rest, and that's what Tom Elliott said to me after the Aston Villa game when I spoke to him. He said, as much as obviously we want to keep that going, then also we have got that, the boys need to get their legs back and make sure that they're fit and raring to go for this game.
It's a very gruelling schedule, the Championship, of course. I mean, as for Saturday's game, then, how much of a challenge do you think that Reading will present Millwall with? And I suppose you're looking at this game sort of in much the same way that we are, in the fact that it's a game against a side also fighting down at the bottom.
Yeah, I think Reading's position looks a little bit false, but then whether I think that's more the squad that they've got. It's a decent squad, and the last couple of managers, for whatever reason, apart from obviously, was it Stam's first season you got to the playoff final?
16-17, yeah.
So, bar that, the manager that then even Stam the second season, and then Clement after him, they haven't been able to get the best out of the group for whatever reason. That strike force is a good strike force at this level. The wingers are decent wingers, and some of the defenders are I'm not sure how well he's been playing for you, but Thiago Ilori and Tyler Blackett have both come from Premier League clubs, and they don't seem to be cutting it quite so much down at Reading. I'm not sure why that is. Obviously you'll have more of an idea than me.
Tyler Blackett sort of struggled with injury a little bit so far this season, but I think he might come back into the side at left back potentially. And certainly you mentioned Thiago Ilori there. He's probably been maybe one of Reading's sort of better players in the start to the season. He's certainly coming a lot under Paul Clement. I think at the start of last season he was getting quite a lot of stick from fans, but I think one of the few positives under Paul Clement actually has been the development of Thiago Ilori. As for Millwall then, who do you think your key player will be at the weekend?
Sean Williams is always the man that keeps it ticking over in midfield.
Yeah,
he's done that for a couple of years for us now. Shane Ferguson's actually come back in and done very well the last couple of games. He was a bit out in the wilderness, and he's come back in. He's got himself a goal and an assist in 2, and added a bit more natural width and then support for James Meredith down the left defensively as well, compared to Aidan O'Brien, who didn't do so much of that. But last couple, probably the key man at the moment is Lee Gregory. He's in some of the form of his life, and whether that's because Tom Bradshaw's come in and they'll both be fighting for that shirt now alongside the target man, because we're always going to play, or we're virtually always going to play with one of Tom Elliott or Steve Morrison. So it's sort of between Gregory and Bradshaw for that other spot in the front too. And Gregory against Aston Villa particularly was absolutely fantastic. He's chased down everything. He must get through more running than pretty much any striker in the Championship, I think. And if his finishing was a bit better, he certainly wouldn't be playing for us.
Jake Cooper obviously signed for you from Reading the season before last, and sort of seems to be doing quite well and sort of proving Reading wrong. How well is he playing at the moment?
Yeah, he's been fantastic so far this season, along with Gregory. Probably those two have been our best players.
Yeah.
He wins absolutely everything in the air. He's a key man at set pieces for us. He's, if you stick the ball at a set piece within about 3 yards of him, then he's probably going to win it. And I think at home he's got a goal or an assist in each of his last 5 games. So that speaks for itself as a centre back. And his passing range has actually come on. More his long passing, but he got a couple of assists last year from long balls that, particularly one I think was at Bramall Lane against Sheffield United, and he just lobbed it over the top of the defence and Steve Morrison volleyed it in. So, but then there's the defensive side as well, which he's had to be more of the leader in the defence so far this season with Sean Hutchinson out injured. So and he's taken that on well, to be fair. Winning most things. He had one little defensive lap against Villa that let them in for the goal. He didn't quite mark Tammy Abraham how he should have done, but other than that, really, it's hard to pick faults in his play so far this year. It's
interesting you mentioned the passing there. I think that was probably one of the main reasons that Jaap Stam actually was was willing to let Cooper go actually from Reading because his passing perhaps wasn't good enough to fit that style. But he certainly is sort of proving Reading wrong. I think certainly he'd definitely get in a team over the likes of Paul Clement at the moment. I mean, I think and almost definitely be competing with Thiago Olly and Liam Moore for a spot in that centre of the defence. It's fantastic to see him doing so well at Millwall. Obviously, it's always nice to see a academy graduate doing so well. Finally then, Lucas, how do you see the game panning out? What's your score prediction for the weekend?
I think it's a game that we've got to be looking to go and get our first away win of the season, in truth.
Yeah.
The way the fans, one more bad result could probably be Clement's last.
Yeah.
And I think it's a game we've got to be looking to go and win. So I'm hoping for a repeat of last year's game at the Majewski, but I think it'll probably be a bit tighter than at the form we've been in. So I'll go for a 1-0 or a 2-1. Not sure who'll get on the score sheet. I'd love to see Cooper get on it with the set pieces, but we'll have to wait and see.
That would just be Reading's luck. I think Jake Cooper to pop up with a 90th minute header probably to win that game. I think certainly from Reading's point of view, as you mentioned, I think this is the sort of game that Paul Clement sort of has to be winning to prove that he is still the right man for the job. I think we've got just one home league win all season. And certainly a game at home against a fellow struggling side, he does need to be winning. So much like you're backing your team, I will back Reading. I think I'll go 1-0 to Reading. But I think certainly, as you say, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Jake Cooper pop up. But I think certainly it may well be a bit of a scrappy encounter.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
My thanks then to you, Lucas, for joining me on The View from the Town End. All the best on Saturday and for the rest of the season.
Cheers, mate. You too.
It's now time then for me and Tom to discuss Reading's team news ahead of Saturday and pick our preferred lineups for the game.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Welcome back to the Tilehurst End weekend preview, looking ahead to Reading versus Millwall, and it's time to discuss the team news for the game. Before the international break, Tom, it was sort of Paul McShane, David Myler, Sam Baldock, Gareth McCleary, John Daly Bodvarsson. Sort of those are the players who were sort of looking like the short-term injuries and potentially coming back into contention. Are any of those sort of maybe coming into the fold this weekend?
Still quite a long list, isn't it? I think obviously David Myler went away with Ireland, so he's obviously fit again if selected now. But it sounds like the rest of them is still a little while away. John O'Shea as well, you didn't mention that. I think he's still out, and then obviously Saeed Zatalai picked up an injury with Iran as well. So there's still quite a few people missing. It sounds like it's going to be pretty much the same sort of squad that played against West Brom, and it sounds like they all still are pretty short-term ones. But in terms of this weekend, I think obviously McCleary's an interesting one because I think he is fit enough now. It's just when they want to throw him in. I imagine it will obviously be from the bench at some point, so possibly this Saturday could be an option for that, especially with the people that are missing. But I think they're reasonably well stocked on the wings, so maybe they'll leave it a little bit longer. But like I say, the rest of them, Baldock, Bodvarsson, I think still missing, which leaves them short up front, and maybe another chance for McNulty or somebody to try and stake a claim up there. But it sounds like just a lot of niggly injuries still being picked up at the moment.
That list is slowly increasing in size. And obviously, you have got the longer term ones as well, the likes of Callum Harriott, Jordan Beattie, Dave Edwards, Omar Richards, and Adrian Popper. So that's 5 more names in itself. Are any of those sort of closing in a return, or do you think we might see them before the next international break, or is it potentially maybe December, January time we might see a couple of those?
Yeah, out of those, probably, only Harriott, but we don't really know, do we? Haven't seen him for nearly 2 years, so I think same fitness-wise, I think he hasn't broken down again yet, as far as I'm aware, so I think he'll still be around, and it's when they want to throw him in, I'd say probably from the bench again at some point. He's played quite a few minutes for 23, so he could possibly be involved in the next few weeks, but I think the rest of them, Popper, Richards still out, and the other two as well, Edwards and Abita, still a little while away as well, so those won't be involved probably until sort of November, December. And then say the rest, Harriet's just with the others really just sort of wait and see, hopefully back in the next couple of weeks.
It does almost sort of make the team sort of perhaps potentially pick itself on Saturday, and with a few options for Paul Clement. But what would your team be, Tom, for the game against Millwall? Yeah,
so he's got a few options, obviously. In goal, I would go for Maloney. I said this on Twitter a few weeks ago and got quite a bit of stick for it, but I think I would go for Maloney now. It is still quite tight. Obviously, Walker had a bit of a day to forget at West Brom, and I think he had a few dodgy moments before that as well that didn't quite lead to goals. I think maybe bring Maloney back in, and then back four. I think it was back 5 at West Brom, but I think it'll be a 4 at home. Yadol, Mallory, Moore and Blackett would be what I'd go with. And then midfielder gets a bit tricky with the people that are missing, I suppose. Bakuna, you'd imagine, will play, the only sort of defensive-minded one senior player you've got in there. I'd play him alongside Kelly, maybe in a 2, and then Sims, I'll say him again. Sims on the right. He's still only started 1 game, it's crazy. Yeah. But and then Swift and Barrow in behind McNulty up front is what I'd go with. Obviously, you've got Mate, maybe Renamoto if he wants to put him in, but I think he'd probably stick with Bakuna and Kelly. And Kelly and Swift don't play too often together, but looking at, like, say, the players that are missing, he might have to go for it this week. And yeah, that would be the 11 I'd go with. There's a couple of people he could pick instead, but like I say, it's a team. Most of the team does sort of pick itself with the injuries they got at the moment.
I mean, we have gone for, as usual, quite similar teams. My only difference was that I would have David Myler over Liam Kelly in that midfield, and potentially go for the 4-3-3 with a midfield 3 of Myler, Bakuna and Swift, and then Barrow and Sims either side of McNulty. But on that midfield, obviously, I'd probably go with Myler, just potentially to add a bit more physicality sort of against this tough Millwall side, and have Myler sort of in that holding role, Bakuna pushing a little bit forward, and then Swift supporting the front 3. But I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, Tommy, you would have Said as a Talahi in that midfield, but he's indeed injured for the next couple of weeks, which is a massive blow, really. I mean, he's made a fantastic start to life at Reading. I mean, just how big a miss will he be this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. A big miss. He's been one of the better players, I think, in the last few weeks. Ever since he's come in the side, he's come straight in and sort of been undroppable since then. He's been definitely one of the better performers. Obviously, this is the problem you have with the internationals. They can go away and pick up knocks, and yeah, sadly he's going to miss a couple of games. But on the flip side, David Myler will see has a chance maybe to get back in himself. Like you say, he's sort of a similar sort of physical presence in there. So yeah, he could well come back in. That wouldn't really be a surprise if he did. He hasn't played for a little while, so it's whether he's fit enough to come straight in and play from the start. But yeah, it's a real problem for them. Just when you think they've found one of these, obviously, so the signings have been a bit mixed this summer, I think, and he was one who seemed to have hit the ground running, and suddenly he's out the team again, and you're looking around for players who have been out of form, Kelly, Swift a bit, and looking for them to suddenly produce something again. So it's another chance for them to do exactly that, and hopefully for their sakes they can do it and keep their place in the team. But like I said, it's far from ideal to lose someone who's been one of your best players in what's been a poor season so far. One
decision that does have to be made, you mentioned it briefly there, is who starts in goal. Obviously, with both Mannone and Walker now fit, and I think we have both gone with Mannone. It would be interesting to see what Clement does. Cause I've said before in this podcast, I think Walker is definitely his preferred choice. Otherwise, I didn't really see logic in bringing him in back in the summer. But we have also said that he hasn't really given much reason to be dropped. I mean, but you did mention obviously against West Brom, he could arguably have sort of been said to have been at fault for at least the first 2 goals. So I think, and obviously Mannone started the season in goal. Do you think that does warrant a recall for the Italian?
I think, like you say, I think Clement may well stick with Walker. I mean, just from my point of view, I would bring Mannone back in. I think he made that obviously mistake on the opening day against Derby, but I think since then, until he got injured, I think he was fairly solid, fairly consistent, and had he not got injured, I don't think he would have been dropped, put it that way. So it's possibly a chance to bring him back in. I think he maybe will stick with Walker just for now, but I say, I've not been entirely convinced by his handling at times, even before the West Brom game, and it sort of got caught out in that one. I don't think he was entirely to blame for some of those goals, but you'd expect him to be a bit more commanding in the box than maybe he has been. Obviously, Mannone has issues as well, so it's a bit of a toss-up, but I'd go for Mannone, but I think it probably will be Walker for this weekend.
We gave the club interviews, I noticed, on sort of the YouTube channel and the official website earlier this week, so I'm not sure how much you can read into that. I mean, to be honest, I think predicting Paul Clement's lineup at the moment is very, very difficult. It wouldn't surprise me perhaps to see Ansi Yakola or George Legg probably start at the weekend, given the way that Clement's selections have been going. And one sort of debate that has been going on, again, is Josh Sims, as you mentioned, still only 1 start for him. And Paul Clement sort of gave, I'm not sure who it was with, but an interview a couple of weeks ago saying about players not being given their opportunities, and how knocking on his doors not really going to help their cause, and that it'll be what they do in training that sort of gets them into the side. Do you think Josh Sims is one of those players? I mean, obviously he's only got 1 start so far this season, but I mean, I think certainly from a fan's point of view, it's very difficult sort of to see why he's not getting into that side.
Yeah, I think he'll be privately a little bit frustrated he's not playing. I don't sense he's the sort of person who would kick up a fuss, though, just from speaking to him and seeing him around the place. He seems to be enjoying when he first came in, and he realised when he first came in, the first few months or first few weeks, really, he was probably not up to speed with the rest of the squad, so it took him a little bit of time to get to the sort of levels that the players have got in over pre-season. So I think that's why he didn't start initially, and he was restricted to the bench, which I think was fair enough. I think he accepted that, but he was performing every time he was coming off the bench, and he started against Hull, and that was the best win of the season. So he can probably feeling a little bit aggrieved to not be in the team. So I don't think he'll be kicking up a fuss just yet. I'd say at Southampton he was out the side as well, so he's obviously come here to get more minutes than he is. I think he has played in every game that every game since he's been, I think he has played a part in. So I think he still feels a part of the team. I think there's probably other players. I say we don't really want to speculate over names particularly, but who haven't even featured at all in the team, or even come on the bench, or even been on the bench. So I think they're probably the ones he was probably referring to a little bit more than Sims. But if you were Josh Sims, I think you would feel a little bit frustrated, and you'd certainly feel you can do a bit more than some of the players who have been picked ahead of you. So if he doesn't start at the weekend or on Tuesday, then yeah, it could potentially be an issue. But I think he will get his chance sooner rather than later from the start, and then it's up to him to keep his place.
As mentioned, Paul Clement's hands are sort of tied a little bit due to injuries. I mean, we saw a couple of youngsters on the bench at West Brom 2 weeks ago in the shape of Andy Rinomota and Tom Holmes. I think Danny Loader travelled with the squad as well. I mean, he wasn't on the bench, but did travel up to West Brom. And do you think there comes a time potentially when they are given a chance to show what they can do on the pitch? I mean, obviously, Clement does have sort of a historical reluctance to play youngsters. But, I mean, if the injuries keep building up and the form doesn't improve, do you give them a chance on the pitch?
Yeah, I'd say eventually he'll probably end up trying anyone out, which that's what happened with Jaap Stam towards the end of his time. Obviously made that game against Bolton, brought Tom Holmes and Yokola in out of nowhere, and it's something that could happen. I think he's quite a fan of Rinomota. I think he's been involved. He was involved a lot in pre-season. I think he's involved a fair amount sort of in the squad this season as well. So I think he's the one who's at the moment probably ahead of the others in terms of getting a chance. Obviously, I think Tom Holmes has done well for the under-23s in the last few weeks as well, and obviously, like I say, he was on the bench at West Brom, but I don't think centre-back at the moment is the biggest issue to suddenly replace Ilori or Moore if you're playing with a back four. I don't think he'll come in, and I think everyone's going to keep wanting to see Danny Loader, and the more he keeps scoring goals, the better chance he's going to get of a chance, especially this weekend if Bodvarsson and Baldock are still out. There's possibility maybe that he'll be on the bench. Obviously, you've got Mate as well, we didn't mention earlier, who he'll probably end up starting, to be fair, but if not, he'll be the striker on the bench. But yeah, I think at the moment, if the injuries keep piling up, you have to use them. And if the results keep going the wrong way, then eventually I think you would be very tempted to throw a couple of them in, and not even throw them in really. They've been training with the first team. I think 5 of them trained with the first team over the international break, 5 of the youngsters. So he's seen them at close quarters, so possibly could see a bit of a surprise at the weekend. But yeah, I think Rinomota and maybe Loader as a substitute could be the closest of those lot at the moment.
Prediction time then, Tom. We said earlier in the show this one would be tight to call, but what are you going to go for Reading versus Millwall?
I had not thought about that because I'd forgotten, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, I think. I'll say I'm away this weekend, so chances are they'll probably win when I'll miss it. But I'll go for 1-1. Just I like to say both teams aren't great. Reading at home, Millwall away, so it's hard to see a win. But you've got to hope that Reading can. I imagine most of you guys will probably go for a Reading win, and hopefully that'll be the case. But I'll stick for a 1-1 this time and see how we go.
I am tempted to go for a draw in this one, and that's just my head is saying that's perhaps more logical. But as I said earlier in the show, I think these sort of games can go either way. I mean, that the defeat to QPR or that big win against Hull. But I did say a win on the view from the town end, so I'll stick with that and say a 2-1 home win. I mean, although if we lose, I think Clement would be on very, very thin ice for me. I think especially going into sort of a tricky looking away fixture to Birmingham on Tuesday night. Yeah,
like you say, that'll be. As I said earlier, if they win this first one, I think you'll look at it and you'll see potential points along the way. But if you lose it, you'll be thinking back-to-back away games at Birmingham and Swansea. It's going to be really tough to get something. Obviously, former Swansea manager as well, so that'll be a big one for him next week. But yeah, it's. I think you maybe should go for a 3-0 win. Really, I'd say they seem to. Although I'm not sure, maybe they won't win 3-0 again all season, probably at the moment. But we'll see.
If you say that now, then they might go and win 4-0 or 5-0.
Exactly, yeah. So I'd probably say 5 or something like that, shouldn't I? Yeah, if they win 5-0, I might not go back for the rest of the season if I miss it. 5-0 win. But yeah, we'll go for 1-0. And like you say, it could easily go either way. It's so difficult to predict at the moment with Reading at the moment. They're down the bottom of the league, not picking up any home wins, and nothing to say this will be any different, but fingers crossed.
We mentioned that Birmingham game on Tuesday night, and that will be previewed on the main show when it returns early next week with Mark Mayo before the weekend preview hits the airwaves again towards the end of next week, looking ahead to Reading's trip to Swansea. A quick plug too for our podcast that went out during the international break, a very special interview with former Reading striker Adam Lafondra, in which we discussed his 3-year spell in Berkshire from making a step up from League Two and his eventual departure and all the financial ramifications that came with it. So that's well worth a listen if you haven't already. As for the website, tilehurstend.com, our loan report is well worth the read to see how the likes of Sam Smith and Tanai Watson and Andrija Novakovic are getting on at their respective loan clubs. And as always, we'll have a full report and ratings from the Millwall game up over the weekend. On a similar note, Tom, what can we look forward to on the Wokingham paper months? I know you're away, but I'm sure there's content going up in your absence.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got someone at the game on Saturday, so they'll be up on wokinhampaper.com on Saturday evening. Then we'll have a reaction throughout the week, and up there at the moment is interview we did with Jed Roddy last week and Ed Franklin on the academy, which is some good stuff on there on Bearwood and the academy and things like that. He's been there sort of 6 months now, 7 months, Roddy, I think. So yeah, really good chat with him, really nice guy. And Sim's column as well has gone up about the owners, so that's up online as well.
Yeah, I mean, that I've had a read of that Jed Roddy interview. It's really interesting, actually. Also, we don't get to hear from sort of the central figures of the club that often, but certainly the update on Bearwood was certainly good to hear, because that seemed to have potentially stalled, but to hear an update on that one was good to read. So make sure you go and check that one out. Thank you very much for joining me then, Tom, on the Tilehurst weekend preview this week.
Nice one, thanks, Ollie. Cheers.
No worries at all, and thank you at home for listening to this week's show. Here's to a return to winning ways this weekend. Come on, you R's.
The Tilehurst End Podcast. By Reading fans, for Reading fans.